Hello everyone and welcome back to Anomalous Archive, where we post scary stories to help you sleep. Please comment where you are listening to my videos from, since I believe it would be fun for all of us to know. Also, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's reach 50 subscribers before the end of December. So sit back, relax and enjoy. I was very young, and the surrounding world seemed just as youthful to me. I remember what my street was like. I remember the view of my yard, bright colors under the bottomless blue sky, a blooming flower bed made of painted car tires, the figure of a smiling sun laid out with red bricks on the white wall of a neighboring house. Every time my gaze stopped on this pattern, I felt that it smiled at me in any weather outside my window. It was my little joke that needed no explanation. I remember the sounds. Every morning began with the same rhythm, the rumble of the wheels of a freight train passing somewhere beyond the forest park. I remember the smells, the aroma of freshly baked bread. Next to my house was a bakery, and all I had to do was go down the stairs and around the corner to get a warm, crispy loaf for breakfast. It was hard to resist and not take a bite of the bread on the way back. I remember the tastes: grape juice from the kiosk at the intersection, sour candies that stuck to your teeth, milkshakes from the local cafe, velvet cocoa. The chocolate flavor, the thick creamy texture, I wanted to savor every sip of this rare treat. I loved those carefree days when everything seemed simple and clear. I loved my family, our small cozy world. Even though I never knew my father, I had my mom and grandmother, kind, loving women. I liked our 9-story house. I liked my room, where I could sit at the desk and draw or look through my collection of gum wrappers. I could lie in bed and read comics. I especially liked the comedic plots about Archie and the adventures of an ancient guy named Goliath. I loved good stories, not scary ones, because my ordinary, fairly happy life was overshadowed by tormenting nightmares. They haunted me every night since childhood. These weren't just scary dreams, but terrifying visions, striking in their realism. In them, I saw familiar places, but they were distorted, like in a funhouse mirror. My dreams were always shrouded in gloomy weather. The sun never peeked out from behind the clouds, and in this eternal gray reality, something terrible constantly happened. Once, I dreamed that terrifying creatures settled on our street. They looked human but had bluish skin, sharp noses, and black, bottomless eyes. Their faces showed no emotions, and their voices sounded indifferent. They walked the streets, barged into apartments uninvited, and tormented the residents. These grim demons set meaningless rules, punishing with chilling cruelty for the slightest misstep. People were forbidden to leave the street, speak loudly, or look the tormentors in the eye. Those who disobeyed were locked in basements and had their children taken away. They did all this without changing expression. The blue-skinned demons were cold and impenetrable, like stones, and their torment felt utterly senseless. I always woke up shaking violently and was glad it was just a dream. But my visions were too vivid to be dismissed as mere imagination. Sometimes, my nightmares were horrifying distortions of what I'd seen during the day. Once, I saw a toy phone on wheels in the Children's World store, a white device with a red receiver, a funny face, and round bulging eyes. It looked completely harmless. But that same night, I dreamed of a man with a telephone for a head, smiling just like the toy from the store. His name was Uncle Smile. He broke into apartments at night and strangled people with the telephone cord. Another nightmare was about our forest park. Supposedly, a man with a boar's head lived there. Huge yellow fangs protruded from his snout. He attacked park visitors, maimed them, leaving wounds that later sprouted mushrooms. The boar-headed man savored eating these mushrooms, while the people slowly died. In my dreams, I was always just an observer. I saw monsters tormenting people but never intervened. I didn't feel fear, I simply watched, accepting what was happening as natural. Only upon waking with a violent shiver did I realize how horrifying my vision had been. The worst part was that no one could take my problems seriously. My family didn't understand how realistic my dreams were. They felt like a second life to me. It was as if I were in one world or another. One, imperfect but quite pleasant, and the other resembled hell. I was told, everyone dreams. They can be absurd, they can be scary. But they don't exist. They're just chaotic illusions of a sleeping brain. I didn't believe that. I felt that everything I saw was happening somewhere in another reality. And there, another me, my double, calmly watched the monsters, nightmares, and human suffering. For him, it was just ordinary life. I felt that an invisible boundary, like a curtain, separated our world from the other one. And I was afraid that this curtain could vanish, and everything I saw in my nightmares would become real. I began keeping a diary of my dreams. Every morning, as soon as I woke up, I would sit at my desk and, with a trembling hand, describe my visions, delving deeper into the mysteries of the nightmare world. Nightmare number 5, the mimic. I dreamed of a monster that could remove its skin and wear someone else's, having stripped it from another person. The people around me started reacting poorly to my obsession with dreams. Mom was worried and told me I needed to spend more time outside, while Grandma gave me chamomile tea. But I could only think about one thing: where is this other reality that I dream about every night? One morning in the yard, I met Luna. That blonde girl lived in the neighboring house with her mother and grandfather. She also never knew her father. Maybe that's why we understood each other. From early childhood, we played together in the yard, and years later, she still smiled when she saw me. Her good relationship with me lasted until I told her about my dream. "Hi, Luke," said Luna. "How are you?" "What a coincidence. Today I dreamed about you and your family," I replied. "Will you tell me?" she asked with interest. "It's unpleasant," I mumbled. "Oh, come on," she said. "Speak." "Please," Luna insisted. "What did you dream about me?" "Spill it." We were no longer kids, but teenagers, studying in high school. I didn't think I would scare her, but I told her my nightmare. I dreamed of some kind of monster with yellow, wrinkled skin. It was watching you and enviously observing your life. It hated its own appearance and followed you, peeking around street corners, climbing walls, and watching you through your window while you slept. And then the monster climbed into your apartment, killed you, your mother, and your grandfather. It tore off its skin and made 3 suits from yours. That's how it started pretending to be your family. Sometimes it dressed as your mother, sometimes as your grandfather, and sometimes as you. It lived in your apartment, and your skin hung in its closet on hangers like. I couldn't finish the sentence. "Stop it," said Luna harshly. "You're crazy if you dream about stuff like that." The girl gave me a scathing look and walked away. She never spoke to me again or even said hello. But I didn't choose my nightmares. I wanted them to stop too. One morning, I woke up and immediately got out of bed to make a new entry in my diary, but I froze on my way to the desk when I saw my reflection. A mirror hung in my room, large like a door, with a wooden frame. It had been there since I was born. But only that morning did it dawn on me, that's where the terrifying reality is. It's right behind that glass. Every night, I dream of the mirror world, and my mirror twin is the other one. I'm a guy who knows no fear. Otherwise, why wasn't my horror reflected on his face? His eyes were cold, and there was a barely noticeable smirk on his lips. I took a step toward the mirror and placed my hand on it. My reflection did the same. Our palms were separated only by the glass, thinner than half a centimeter. But it wasn't the glass that was the barrier. My twin couldn't come out because I was always standing in his way. My palm pressed against his palm. We pushed against each other with perfectly equal force. That's why I couldn't end up in the nightmare world, and he couldn't penetrate our world. But my twin wanted to escape the mirror. I read this curious desire in his gaze. He was thinking about how to pass through the thin veil and bring nightmares with him. His thoughts were readable in the fleeting movements of his face. From that morning, I began obsessively watching my reflection, staring into the mirror for hours every day. The nightmare diary now included not only dreams but also notes about what happened with my reflection. Sometimes it seemed to me that the mirror twin was ahead of me by a fraction of a second. Sometimes he made an independent gesture, raising his eyebrows, wrinkling his nose, or twitching his hand at moments when I wasn't moving. These were alarming signs. It seemed the twin was trying to break our connection. He didn't want to be a puppet. I found a name for him in a Russian English dictionary during a school lesson. Reverse means opposite. A complex, awkward word, not at all like a name. But my twin wasn't human. That crude nickname suited him. Mom and Grandma noticed my strange behavior. They asked me to stop staring into the mirror and focus on other things, but I felt like this was how I kept control. What does the twin do when I'm not in front of the mirror? Where does he go, and what does he do? I forced him to stay in place by looking into the mirror, and the longer I watched, the fewer nightmares I had at night. Now I often dreamed of looking at myself from the other side of the mirror through his eyes. But one day, Mom read my diary and decided something had to be done. "Luke, what's happening to you?" she asked through tears, clutching the notebook in her hands. "I can't explain," I replied. "You can't live like this," Mom said. "You're sick." And I shouted, "No! It's real. It's all real." But no one ever believed me. Mom had already called an ambulance, and paramedics appeared at our doorstep. I screamed and begged not to be handed over to them, trying to break free from the grip of two strong men. Mom just covered her face with her hands, and Grandma tried to comfort her. "Don't worry. Luke will be treated, and everything will be fine. He's not crazy, it's just his nerves." But I screamed like a true madman. "Mom, Grandma, you can't leave him unsupervised. He'll get out." They pushed me into the ambulance and gave me a shot in the shoulder. Heat spread throughout my body, and it became impossible to tense my muscles. My brain was fogged, and everything around became quiet and muffled. I saw a 3-story building, stairs, corridors. Questions were asked. Name? Date of birth? I answered them automatically without straining my memory. Then I was asked to take some pills, after which I fell into an empty, deep sleep. Perhaps it was the first night in my life that passed without nightmares. Darkness and silence enveloped me. And in the morning, I woke up in an unfamiliar setting, a ward with yellow-painted walls and a whitewashed ceiling. It had 3 beds, but no neighbors. An elderly nurse brought me breakfast and then escorted me to the doctor's office. He was a gray-haired, balding man named Victor Leonhardt. He asked how I was feeling, asked a few questions about my life and hobbies, and then, almost casually, explained my condition. "Mom said you've been having nightmares. Luke, tell me, what are these dreams? They're like reality, right? Every detail is vivid, and the picture is clear. You see everything as clearly as we see each other now?" "Yes," I replied in surprise. "How do you know that?" "It's a common symptom for people with your condition," the doctor calmly explained. "But don't worry. You have a mild case. You seem like a normal guy, just a little lost in your fantasies. Victor Leonhardt described my feelings so simply and precisely that I believed every word and, without regret, renounced what I had believed in for years. It freed me from pain and fear, giving me hope that everything might finally come to an end. In the clinic, they gave me pills every day, after which I slept peacefully, serenely, like a baby. I forgot about my double and the mirror world, about the nightmares. I was free. I just wanted to sleep and enjoy the tranquility, sleep in the morning after breakfast, in the afternoon after lunch, and then at night fall into a warm void. I don't know how much time passed like that. The leaves had fallen off the trees outside. And when I had first arrived at the clinic, the trees were golden. This made me wonder, why hadn't Mom and Grandma visited me even once? It seemed strange, and I went to the doctor's office to ask about it. Victor Leonhardt seemed confused. He looked at me as if I were a stranger and asked, "And who are you? What's your name?" "Luke Sterling," I reminded him. I hadn't expected the doctor to forget his patients so easily. "I don't see that name on the list," Victor Leonhardt said, thoughtfully flipping through his files. "And where do you live?" "Snowfall Street, House 11, I replied. "What street?" "Snowfall?" The doctor frowned. "Yes," I nodded, still not realizing what was happening. "Sounds familiar. Where is it?" Victor Leonhardt looked worried. "Well, between the hospital and the forest park," I explained, hoping it was just a misunderstanding. "Hold on a second." The doctor rummaged through all the papers on his desk, then said, "Here's the thing. There's no Snowfall Street. And there's no record of you either. Luke, where did you even come from? Who are you? Don't you remember me?" I whispered, feeling goosebumps all over my body. "I do remember. Your face is familiar. But are you even our patient? Your file isn't anywhere." The doctor looked at me with fear, as if he were seeing a ghost. I'd been forgotten. Snowfall Street had been forgotten. And I didn't understand what it meant. But one thing was clear: if I wasn't in the records, I didn't need to wait for discharge. I could just leave. I took advantage of the commotion. While the doctor ran to his colleagues to figure out what was going on, I quietly slipped out of my wing, snuck into the wardrobe, and found my clothes. All that was left was to leave the clinic grounds. That turned out to be easy. The guard at the checkpoint mistook me for an outsider and chased me away, threatening to call the police. I ran home, ignoring the passers-by. I just wanted to figure out what was happening, to see my familiar street, my house, meet my mom and grandma, and make sure everything was fine. The doctor said there was no Snowfall Street, but I knew exactly where to look, which way to turn, and how to get there. The street was cold. My thin sweater didn't keep out the wind, but I felt even colder when I finally reached the familiar turn. Clouds covered the sky above the rooftops with an impenetrable gray veil. Black trunks of frozen trees with motionless bare branches loomed in the fog. The houses stood as if abandoned. Not a single light shone in the windows. Everything was like in my dreams. I walked through the fog toward my house, past a cafe with empty windows, past a kiosk with a shattered display, stepping around open manholes without covers. There wasn't a soul around. Only occasionally did shadows flicker in the distance. Everything was like in my nightmares. I was trembling with fear, looking around. A trash can, an ordinary rusty container, but inside were human bones and skulls covered in congealed green slime. I knew exactly who had done it. A Verathil, a terrifying tall woman with a huge mouth from one of my old nightmares. She would catch teenagers on the streets, swallow them whole, and then spit out the bones. This wasn't madness. My nightmares had come alive and taken over the street while I slept away the days in the psychiatric clinic. And suddenly, a familiar figure appeared ahead. A bright, smiling girl with freckles all over her face, Luna, an old friend. She was walking carelessly down the street in a light jacket, despite the cold. I ran to her, hoping she'd forgotten her grudge and could talk to me. "Luna, what happened?" I asked. The girl seemed surprised by my question. "What happened? Is something wrong?" she replied. I knew her voice too well not to notice the difference. Luna had a completely different tone. The girl's lips stretched into a strange smile, and her eyes didn't blink. She stared at my face without looking away. This wasn't Luna. The same hair color, the same face, but her gaze was empty and cruel. A horrifying creature wearing her skin stood before me. "Want to come over?" the pseudo-Luna asked, reaching out her hand. Her fingers were thin, and her nails long and sharp. "Maybe another time," I replied. I recoiled and ran away. I ran until I felt my lungs were about to burst. In front of me was the familiar house with a pattern of a smiling sun. But in this grim atmosphere, its smile seemed sad. And suddenly, as I ran past the bakery, someone's face appeared from a broken window. "Hey, Luke, are you alive?" someone shouted. I stopped. From the bakery window climbed out Marcus Miller. He was a year ahead of me in school, and we occasionally crossed paths there. His black leather jacket was all torn, and his face was smeared with soot. "Marcus, have you seen my mom or grandma? Have you seen anyone?" I asked, gasping for breath after running. The guy shook his head. "No, I haven't seen anyone. Sorry, they're probably not alive anymore. Almost no one's left alive here. You shouldn't have come here." I didn't even want to hear that something might have happened to my relatives, so I asked something else. "Why are you here?" "They won't let me leave," Marcus replied, his gaze drifting somewhere into the distance. "You don't know what happened, do you?" First, the sky over the district turned gray, and some blue freaks appeared. They were standing naked in the middle of the street, immediately drawing the attention of the local gang. The hooligans approached them, started laughing, and those bluish guys beat them up, took their clothes, and started walking the streets like they owned them. Then it got worse. Pale, bald freaks crawled out of the sewer manholes. And there are flying creatures, too. Who knows how many more are out there? I listened to Marcus without interrupting. I didn't want to admit that it was probably all the doing of my doppelganger. The evil twin had indeed escaped from the mirror, and Snowfall Street had become part of another, nightmarish reality. "Luke, let's get out of here," Marcus said, a tear rolling down his cheek. "Get me out of here, please." He looked so frightened and miserable that I decided, without hesitation, to help him escape. Everything else could wait. No one should remain in this dreadful reality. We walked back, trying to avoid open spaces. We clung to the walls and froze whenever we heard any sound, like the tinkling of glass or the creak of metal. But we didn't even make it a couple of yards before shadows appeared in the fog. Ahead, behind, to the left, to the right, silent figures in dark clothing and pale faces surrounded us. They exuded cold terror. Marcus froze, his eyes darting around. "No, no, not them," he whispered. We were surrounded. They moved toward us like a pack of hungry predators. And I recognized them. These were the underground people, pale, bald creatures with disfigured faces, covered in burns and blisters. There was nowhere to run. The underground people closed in tightly, and one of them grabbed Marcus by the neck. His skin sizzled. The boy's scream soon turned into a rasp. They pounced on him as a mob. The underground people dragged his lifeless body to an open sewer manhole. They threw him in head first, and silence fell. I stood there, eyes shut, expecting them to grab me too, expecting it to hurt. Their sweat was acid. The touch of the underground people left horrific burns. But nothing happened. I slowly opened my eyes. They were gone. They had simply left, dissolving into the fog, leaving me alone on an empty street among the tall buildings and trash scattered on the asphalt. But why? I stood there for a long time, paralyzed by fear, and suddenly heard a voice behind me. No one will touch you, but that doesn't mean you're welcome here. It was my own voice. I turned around and saw myself, my doppelganger, the same height, the same appearance, but utterly cold and eerie. Or reverse. He was dressed in my jacket and my jeans. "This is my street now," he said in an icy tone. "Mom. Grandma." I stammered with trembling lips. "They're gone," he replied and showed me his hand. His fingers looked like sharp shards of glass, all cracked, assembled from dozens of separate fragments. "Leave while I'm letting you go. And never come back." What could I say in response? The evil twin had won. While I was kept in the psychiatric hospital, he managed to break free. And so, in despair, I walked away down the street that had once been mine but now was foreign. I walked without looking back. My world had died forever,